So what do you expect to come back to?
If that thing doesn't change course and comes right up Terrebonne Bay, not much. So we got everything off the walls, out the closets that's, valuable, and that's what we're bringing home. So it's, we haven't been this nervous since Andrew.
That is the sentiment from many as Ida nears the Gulf Coast. This was a scene just north of New Orleans as residents evacuated more vulnerable areas ahead of the hurricane. Long lines combed through the city of Slidell, Louisiana earlier as Louisiana officials urged people to leave before landfall. And here is a live look along the roads in Baton Rouge, the city on edge as Ida turns closer to Louisiana. There you see at least a decent stream of cars traveling there. Of course, I-10 being a major thoroughfare there. A lot of people coming perhaps from New Orleans or just leaving Baton Rouge. Let's get you caught up now on some of the latest information we are getting in. Right now, widespread evacuations are in effect for low-lying and coastal areas in Louisiana and Mississippi. In New Orleans, officials are warning residents to either be on the road or home by midnight. Meanwhile, 500 FEMA workers are in Texas and Louisiana standing by to respond to the storm. A lot of preparation, Mike, and for good reason.
Getting the folks out of harm's way is so important, and you can see a lot of people in a hurry to get out of town, that's for sure. Let's bring you the very latest on Ida right now. Still a Category 2 hurricane, winds at 105 miles per hour. The interesting thing with the last advisory was the pressure came down a little bit, meaning we got a deepening low pressure, strengthening storm in essence, and I think that the wind speeds will come up overnight tonight. We're about 200 miles south-southeast of the mouth of the Mississippi. So right here is coastal Louisiana. It's right there, okay? You can see just how close the hurricane is getting at this point, and we're now starting to get a lot of convection building around the center here now, and I think you're going to see well-formed eye overnight tonight, and ultimately what all this deep kind of brown or deep red color is, that's strengthening. That's thunderstorms surrounding the eye now, and so it's becoming a little bit more symmetrical, and I think you're going to see some intensification. The airplanes are out there right now. We'll have continuous Hurricane Hunter flights up through landfall here and get some really good data, hopefully from the Hurricane Hunters. Dr. Greg Postel is breaking down potentially catastrophic storm surge that Ida could unleash along the Gulf Coast. Take a look.
Hurricane Ida is closing in on the northern Gulf Coast. Expect destructive winds and life-threatening storm surge. Storm surge warnings are up for parts of Louisiana and Mississippi, and let me show you what storm surge actually looks like. Let's bring that water up to 3 feet. 3 feet of water, very dangerous. It can float cars away, knock you off your feet. Who knows what's hiding in this water, and certainly can flood out parts of the first floors of homes and businesses. But let's bring that up even higher. Let's bring that up to 6 feet. 6 feet of water. That's as tall as I am, even higher than that. Life-threatening. Oftentimes, the only way to escape this is to go up if you can. Certainly, this can flood out the first floors of homes and businesses. But we know some places will see maybe storm surge as high as 9 feet or higher. That can put entire neighborhoods underwater. So make sure you prepare and get those preparations, rush them to completion, because there's only a handful of hours left before you can do that. Stay tuned to the latest forecast and follow the advice of the officials. If they ask you to evacuate, do so. Time is running out.
All right, so let's talk some specifics about the storm surge that we could see, and I want to go to a few specific areas. I want to take you to Thibodaux, okay, because we've got Bayou Lafourche comes right through town, all right, and I think near the bayou you're going to get maybe around 3 feet of surge that's possible, but I'm really concerned about between Burma Road and the bayou, the high surge that could come here. It could be 6 to 9 feet. That could include, say, Ed White High School. That could include Nichols State. So I'm worried about those locations, but let's go farther south. We're going to be a little bit closer to the coast of Louisiana. A lot of concerns for Houma. Now, I'm going to slow down. For you folks that are in Houma, I'm going to slow down for you here and really point out a few spots for you here that I'm worried about. All right? So here's the intercoastal right through here. So there's one body of water. Then we've got the bayou right here. Then we've got Little Black Bayou. Then we've got Black Bayou here. And really, you've got access to the intercoastal this way as well. Intercoastal curves around here. And the intercoastal also comes back here toward North Hollywood Road. All right, so you've got all these different bodies of water that could affect you here in Houma. So I'm going to point out a few spots, a few landmarks for you here, okay? Hospital's going to sit about right here, all right? What we're anticipating around the hospital could be as much as 3 feet of water at the hospital. Another medical center right here could be 3 to 6 feet at the medical center here. I want to point out a few more spots, including the high school, which sits about right here. That's Terrebonne High School. How much are we looking for there? That could be around 3 feet. It's highlighted in blue on the map there. A couple other spots that you're probably familiar with, right around Grand Caillou Road. Right here, Walmart. Everyone knows where the Walmart in town is, right? How much water there potentially? About 3 feet could be anticipated with the current track here. And now think about this too. I think about Tunnel Road. How many of you travel on Tunnel Road in Houma? It's right in here. That's going to be south of the high school here. Now think about what's on Tunnel Road. Synergy Bank, Popeyes, Applebee's. The thing I'm concerned about here is now the forecast is 3 to 6 feet of water there. The problem is just on the north side of Tunnel Road, there's a very sneaky little bayou that sits right in there, the St. Louis Bayou. This is why a place like Tunnel Road could have a lot more water than other places like, say, Grand Caillou Boulevard here. Please be careful, folks. Water could inundate many locations in Houma. We're back right after this.
Just hours away from big impacts here. We'll have the latest on the timing and the wind threat.
A forecast landfall in less than 24 hours on the Louisiana coast. And that landfall on the same day as Katrina came to New Orleans 16 years ago. This area has been preparing all day, but there are concerns that exist. Big concerns. We will talk about those coming up.
And we know there are countless people on the Gulf Coast boarding up, packing up, and leaving as a hit from a major hurricane less than a day away from bringing extreme wind, flooding rain, up to 15 feet of storm surge to Louisiana, into Mississippi and Alabama. And time is quickly running out to finalize your preparations and hunker down for Ida's approach. Ida, we know, quickly coming in, and overnight, the wind and the rain will begin to move in. Here's the very latest on Ida for us right now. You can see the track, and it's still forecast to be a major hurricane, 130-mile-per-hour winds. You're taking a live look at New Orleans and Slidell as people are still leaving right now. Hurricane warnings, in fact, highlighted in purple on your screen there. That'll include just about Orleans and Baton Rouge with tropical storm warnings that go north of I-20 for us as well. So a lot to hash out here tonight, right here on the Weather Channel. Thanks for being with us. I'm meteorologist Mike Bettis alongside meteorologist Julie Martin. Our Jackie Jarris is live for us tonight. She is in Baton Rouge. You know, you look at what's coming, Jackie. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of concern here. And I know Baton Rouge may not be dead center of the cone. It may not be that close to the water's edge here. But even if you are inland, this is a storm that we all need to take very seriously.
Absolutely. You know, we're 80 miles inland and we've got a hurricane warning here, and winds could be over 100 miles per hour. So that's one of the big concerns here today, is that we may be looking at some serious damage as well as power outages that could last for days, if not more than a week. So most people have decided to stay here and ride out the storm, but Baton Rouge sits behind me on the Mississippi River, and you can see over my shoulder, that's the Interstate River Bridge, Interstate 10, and that's a big evacuation route. Folks leave from New Orleans, folks leave from southern Louisiana, work their way up to I-10 and go either east or west. It has been a solid stream of traffic here all day long, more than 6 miles of bumper-to-bumper traffic. It's been very, very difficult to get anywhere, especially if you're trying to go westbound. In fact, I was listening to one of the local radio stations, and I heard story after story after story of folks who were, you know, expecting to travel maybe 2 hours, and it was taking them 8 hours or more to be able to take that trip. Now, the airport's still up and running and operational, but flights have been canceled ahead of Ida. In fact, as of 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, there will be, the most part, those skirted Baton Rouge today and really gave folks that extra time to get ready. Here's the mayor, Mayor Broome, with a little bit more on what the city has been doing today.
We have implemented a state of emergency. The governor did, and I did one for our city and parish. And we are using all resources that are available to us as needed. And of course, that may mean the National Guard or water rescue. Of course, locally here, we have our EMS team, our fire department, who understand the issues surrounding hurricanes. And we've had many deep conversations around what we're going to do here locally. But we just want everyone to be safe, to be aware, to be vigilant, and we will get through this if we pull together.
And after spending the day here, people do seem aware. They do seem prepared. There are people here who wanted to leave that said that they didn't have the means to do so. Most locations, as long as you're in an interior room, hopefully going to come out of this one okay here, Mike. But, you know, people have to realize that even though we are away from the coast, we could be dealing with almost like the equivalent of an EF2 tornado.
Yeah.
And that's how people here are going to have to ride out that storm. The wind threat is that serious here. And you heard the mayor talking about the rainfall and flood threat, too. There are a lot of low-lying areas. We've had a lot of rain the last couple of months. So no surge issues, though, here. That at least we don't have to worry about so much.
That is good news. But knowing that we're likely to have a stronger storm tomorrow than we have tonight, the winds coming up is definitely going to be a concern. How much damage could we see? How much power outages? Those kind of things. 105-mile-per-hour winds for us right now, Category 2, about 200 miles south-southeast of the mouth of the Mississippi here. Let's go real close here and give you a detailed view of what's going on in the center, and it's not good news, unfortunately, especially now that you start to see the eye that's formed. There's a little pinhole of an eye, right? But then you look around that, okay? That's where you're starting to see now all the convection really start to wrap all the way around it. What that means is it's now probably going through a more of a cycle of intensification and big outer bands that are now starting to create tall thunderstorms as well. Here are the outer bands just off the coast of Florida, okay? Not bad winds. I don't think you have much effect here. 5 to 10 mile per hour winds from Key West all the way up through Tampa. But let's go up now to the north side of the hurricane. These bands in here, see the lightning within those? Tall thunderstorms, hail and ice in the top of those thunderstorms. And as those come in, those could potentially produce severe weather, but you could also see gusts to 60 miles an hour as opposed to what you have now, which are winds that are generally less than 10 miles per hour. But now we're going to start to see the push of water as well. Storm surge warnings, Pecan Island, Grand Isle, all the way through Mobile Bay. Look at the water right now. It's not bad, but look at where the direction of the flow is right now. It's mostly east to west here, and then kind of in this direction here. But eventually it's going to come in like this. And once it starts pushing toward the shore, it's like a catcher's mitt. It's just kind of everything's pushing into that catcher's mitt with a concave shape there, and you're maximizing the storm surge here. Angle of approach is important. Intensity is important. Size of the hurricane is important. But notice this, especially right where the cone is. We've got 10 to 15 feet here in coastal Louisiana, then come back around over into coastal Mississippi. That'll include Biloxi, Gulfport, Long Beach, Bay St. Louis, Waveland. 7 to 11 feet of storm surge anticipated there. Biloxi over toward Pascagoula, 4 to 7 feet of storm surge there, and 2 to 4 feet up through Mobile Bay. There's a look again at the forecast cone here with a Category 4 hurricane potentially at landfall here and then weakening as it comes in with the friction of land here. Hurricane warnings in effect, tropical storm warnings that go all the way north of I-20. That's a big deal, folks. When do those winds come in, though? We think, excuse me, right at the edge here. 2 a.m. is when the tropical storm force winds come in a place like New Orleans. Happens by Sunday, tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. And then the winds only get more intense from there and likely hurricane force winds, Jackie. 1:30 at landfall is going to cause damage. And yes, it will cause damage in a place like New Orleans as well.
Yep, and we're going to get those winds really strong here. Still could be 100 miles per hour or better. So the hurricane will weaken as it moves its way inland, but it takes a while from a storm that intense and of that size to begin to spiral down a little bit, and it will be slowing down to go along with that. So folks need to be in place tonight where they're planning to ride out this storm. We think the tropical storm force winds probably aren't going to arrive till maybe midday tomorrow here, with the worst of the storm coming in through the evening and overnight hours. That said, I've been looking at some of the short-term, better resolution computer models, and they have been hinting that some of these squalls could be arriving by early tomorrow morning, maybe 8, 9 o'clock or so. And if that does come true, you know, we could get stronger gusts within some of those squalls way ahead of where the main impact is going to be coming in. So this is going to be a really close shave for Baton Rouge, where that center is going to be going. It could be right on top of us, and a little wobble left or a little wobble right could have a really big impact on what we're going to end up getting. If it stays to our right, we will be in a little bit better shape with more offshore conditions or winds coming in on the backside of the storm, but it stays a little bit to our left. That certainly would get us within the eye wall and some of the strongest of winds that could really be devastating here. So people really need to be prepared and know that they need to ride it out like a tornado when the worst of the conditions come in. The only exception to that rule would be if flooding is happening and your life is being threatened by that flooding. Now, flooding, of course, is one of the biggest concerns in a place like New Orleans. Meteorologist Jim Cantori is there with the latest on preparations.
A pretty nice night here in New Orleans, but boy, what is looming offshore is not nice at all. Things we're seeing tonight, the entire French Quarter shut down, restaurants, bars here in the city that people come to kind of relieve a little stress. The New Orleans and the Natchez both kind of sitting here on the shoreline in port where they would normally be enjoying a nice little river cruise, especially during the daytime hours. Either way you slice it, this area is going to deal with a hurricane, whether they deal with the right front quadrant or the eye wall or the outskirts of that. There will be big impacts in through here. First of all, rainfall. This is a city that sits 8 feet below sea level. Can we pump 10 to 15 inches of rain out of the city? That's the first question. 96 and 99 pumps are working. The other question is, you have many, many hospitals here around New Orleans, 30 of them. They are full of patients, many with COVID. Should we lose power? Should we need to get them out of a flood situation? That will be a daunting task, to say the least. So these are things we will be watching as this storm potentially grows overnight into a major hurricane. That's the forecast, and that's what's coming ashore in Louisiana sometime on Sunday. The anniversary of Hurricane Katrina 16 years ago to the date. How eerie is that? Reporting from the Riverwalk in New Orleans, I'm meteorologist Jim Cantori.
It is eerie. It is ironic. You know, you have that sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach when you see a storm like this coming and you've already been through something like Katrina. So hopefully the levee system will work. Hopefully they're going to be able to pump that water out of the city and that folks are going to ride out this one A-OK. It's tough when you're facing all this, especially with the pandemic going on top of that. And Julie, we're facing that here in Baton Rouge as well. COVID cases are sky high here right now. The hospitals are full. In fact, on my way here, while I was waiting for my vehicle today, I ran into a gentleman that works with an ambulance company, and they deployed 250 ambulances here to Baton Rouge to help with the COVID, but also in case there are any injuries with the winds or any flooding that comes with this as well. But flooding may be one of the big factors. I know you're talking about more of that and the impacts that they can expect in New Orleans.
Yeah, and I was reading that there are very few ICU beds left in the New Orleans hospitals. So again, really just a combination of terrible scenarios potentially coming together here, Jackie. So we're going to keep following that thread for you as well. We want to talk a little bit more about New Orleans, what is expected. We've got the rainfall coming in. We've got storm surge there coming into the southern parishes, but the rain is what's going to lead to potential flooding outside of those levees. And we are looking at plenty of it coming in throughout the day tomorrow, throughout tomorrow night. We've got the hurricane force wind gusts also coming into a place like Houma, Morgan City, where Jackie is in Baton Rouge. Not out of the question we're going to see hurricane force gusts there. New Orleans as well, going to be awfully close for you. Looking, though, at the future radar, certainly the rainfall is a big concern. In a place like New Orleans, as Jim was mentioning, every drop of water that comes into that city has to be pumped right back out, and those pumps are going to be having their work cut out for them if we're talking about maybe 15 inches of rainfall coming in before we're all said and done here. We're looking at anywhere from a foot to maybe even a foot and a half in some areas coming into, again, areas that are either at or below sea level. So that water has nowhere to go. The ground also very, very saturated. We've had a ton of rain in Louisiana so far this year, so we just don't need any more. So that's going to be an ongoing story. So with the wind, we've got the power outages to worry about. Those could last for days, if not longer. Here's a look at some timing for you then. We're going to start to see those tropical storm force wind gusts pick up tomorrow. As Jackie mentioned, some of those bands that are going to be coming in, bringing the rain along with the wind, but the winds just continuing to amp up as Ida gets gets closer and closer, dealing with hurricane force wind gusts as we get into the afternoon hours tomorrow and then lasting perhaps through Sunday night. So again, this is when we're going to be expecting the power situation to be compromised here. Also the storm surge. We've got a place like Grand Isle expecting to take on 10 to 15 feet. We've got some portions of those southern areas also anywhere from 7 to 11 feet. Lake Pontchartrain, Mike, we could get a storm surge there, maybe a few feet or higher. So again, New Orleans kind of right in the middle. And if we just see that storm wobble a little bit to the right, they're going to be smack dab in the crosshairs.
100%. Now, I want to take you to New Orleans because usually on a Saturday night, what does it look like, Julie? I mean, it's packed with people, isn't it? Look, there's hardly anybody there. A lot of the businesses have closed for the hurricane, allowing their employees to go home, pack up, evacuate, do what they may need to do. But usually this would be teeming, literally with thousands and thousands of people. It's almost a ghost town for us tonight. Again, we got hurricane warnings in effect here. Now, I will say this about the French Quarter. If you remember back to Katrina, it's actually one of the little bit high. I mean, there's no real high place, if you will, in New Orleans, but it's one of the higher spots that doesn't tend to flood as much as other parts of town. But nonetheless, when you see this really should be an eye-opening scene for you that people have heeded the warning. New Orleans is really serious about this, and no one's going to take any chances. Obviously, we know it's anxious times with what's happened, certainly with Katrina. We know that this may have a somewhat similar path, and I think that's really about kind of probably where the similarities end. It might be a similar location, but I don't know if we're going to have similar effects as Katrina. We have a big, robust levee system now that gives us some reassurance. It's not foolproof, that's for sure, but when you take a look at where this could be headed, there's a look at the forecast for Category 4, 130-mile-per-hour winds coming in midday tomorrow, but a cone that goes all the way through the Ohio Valley with heavy rain effects that goes all the way through the Northeast. We're back with more on Ida right after this.
You can't stop a force of nature. This hurricane season, rely on one of your own. Whoa. It's a fact. No other news network out there is trusted more than the Weather Channel.
This is epic.
Trusted to give you every advantage before the storm. Trusted to be there where and when you need us. Trusted to work around the clock until every threat is over.
We're in this for the long haul.
Because America doesn't trust hurricane season to just anyone.
I know that tomorrow, for many people, is a very difficult anniversary. It is the 16th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. I'm also aware that it's very painful to think about another powerful storm like Hurricane Ida making landfall on that anniversary. But every storm is different. They all bring their own challenges. But I also want you to know that we're not the same state that we were 16 years ago.
Interesting words to hear from the governor, almost comforting to hear him talk with such care about how difficult and painful it is for folks to be facing another major hurricane. New Orleans in particular has been through so much, but so is all of Louisiana the last number of years with so many landfalling hurricanes. So here we are again today on a weekend eerily familiar that we're looking at another major hurricane to be making landfall on the state's coast. Folks have been aware of it. They're getting ready for it. And hopefully with that Katrina memory and anniversary in their minds will help them to remember how devastating hurricanes are and to take things so seriously and to evacuate when you're told to evacuate, make your preparations done, and just be ready and talk to your people and take care of each other and go where you need to go to be safe. We've got a storm that's a Category 2 right now, Mike Bettis, but I know, this is the time of the year, which is why we're having all these anniversaries like Laura yesterday, is because the waters are right, the winds are light, and climatologically, all signs are very favorable for rapidly intensifying storms. This is the season of major hurricanes now.
Yeah, and this is the basin where it happens. The Gulf of Mexico, more than any spot in the Atlantic basin, is the spot where if you're going to get a rapidly intensifying hurricane, it would happen in the Gulf of Mexico. Jackie, thanks so much. We're going to get more from Jackie here in just a moment. I want to detail some of the rain that we're likely to get from Hurricane Ida. Obviously heaviest where the hurricane is the strongest, where it may slow down just a little bit as it interacts with land here right through Louisiana and Mississippi. But notice where, and you follow the color code at the top of the screen here, notice where we could get 3 inches of rain that goes well up into maybe a Tupelo. Could get some of that in Middle Tennessee, where we've been so hard hit lately with the flooding. You really feel for the people there in Waverly, but Middle Tennessee up through Kentucky, Louisville, then right through the Ohio River Valley. A lot of these places could see up to 3 inches of rain come out of this, and a lot of these places have very saturated ground right now, so we're already predisposed to getting the flooding. But there's the high-res model that brings it in. So here we are, center of circulation right there, forecast to be at 11 a.m. on Monday, okay? But notice where that heavy rain is, most heavily loaded north and east side of the storm at this point, coming up 55, then coming across 20 and 22. Notice now Tuesday morning, the center of circulation is kind of fizzling at this point, but still producing some really heavy rain, and then thunderstorms that trail back down along that, back down through Alabama and Georgia, and then all the way down through the panhandle of Florida still, but tons of heavy rain for us in and around Middle Tennessee and Nashville. Take it to Jackson, Mississippi. That's a forecast for 5 inches of rain. A little bit more as you go south of I-20. Now, the time frame up there is Sunday through Tuesday, but ultimately that's probably about a 12-hour window of rain, not a 3-day window of rain. So that could cause some flash flooding with 5 inches in the forecast. There's the center of circulation near Nashville on Tuesday, bringing the heavy rain across the Tennessee Valley, then the Ohio Valley. So I think a place like Louisville or Lexington, over toward Charleston, Mayville, Ohio, Wheeling, West Virginia, south of Pittsburgh especially. And then notice that really heavy band of rain there. Harrisburg over toward Newark and New York. I think even Philly and Trenton get some heavy rain. Then up to 3 inches rain in Hartford or even Boston. That's the European model, GFS model, somewhat similar. And that's days away. That's middle and late week coming for us. But there again is a look at the track as it spins up and through the Ohio Valley. It'll fall apart at that point. But we're in for it, Jackie. And knowing how much rain is coming even to the Ohio Valley and Northeast with this thing is going to just be moisture laden. Be ready for that.
Yeah, and so much of this area and that area as well have had a lot of rain so far this year. That's the case here in Baton Rouge, where we have a rainfall surplus of over 8 inches if we only go back to June 1st. But if we go all the way back to January, the surplus is more than 20 inches. So certainly have had our fair share of rain, way too much. More in the forecast, certainly not welcome, and certainly not the numbers that we're expecting. Now, the rain could begin as early as tomorrow morning. We had a couple of spotty showers and thunderstorms across the area earlier today, mostly missing Baton Rouge proper and staying up towards our north. But some of those outer bands could be arriving by 8, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning that could start some of the heavy downpours. Rainfall rates are going to mean a lot, but there will come a point eventually, especially in the evening, where the rain will be persistent. And it's going to be a very close shave for Baton Rouge as to where that center is going to go. And the models have been quite consistent, bringing it either over us or very near us. Now, if it goes a little off towards our east, we could really be in better shape in terms of the rainfall numbers. Stays a little farther to the west, we're going to be in worse shape for both rainfall, but also some of those wind conditions. But the broader area is expected to get, 8, 9 inches across the area, but locally heavier amounts are expected. We could be talking about 16, 17, even 18 inches of rain. Continuing coverage after this.
No other news network out there is trusted more than the Weather Channel.
This is epic.
Trusted to be there where and when you need us. trusted to work around the clock until every threat is over.
We're in this for the long haul.
Because America doesn't trust hurricane season to just anyone.
My biggest concern of this storm is that the people, especially in our outlying areas and our lower lying areas outside of the levee protection system, that are staying. The storm surge that we are expecting is unsurvivable. You have time to get out, especially in those areas where there's a mandatory evacuation. We need you to leave immediately.
It's been a long day of evacuations and preparations as folks here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, prepare from Hurricane Ida. All of southeastern Louisiana on alert under hurricane warnings as a major hurricane is set to make landfall tomorrow, likely into the midday hours as well. I'm meteorologist Jackie Jarrett. So glad you could be with us here tonight for so much information to get through that you need to know. We're waiting for a brand new advisory from the National Hurricane Center, where we're going to get the complete package, an update on the intensity of the storm, but also an update on that forecast track. And we're closing in on the final hours here, where people are going to be experiencing tropical storm force winds and hurricane conditions already by the time that they wake up. So, I'm out here on the riverfront along the banks of the Mississippi River. We got some kids over here and some parents that are biking, kind of jovial right now. And you need that break sometimes, because it's tough to know what's coming this way. It's tough for a lot of folks today who are going through a lot and are likely going to have some of their lives changed, possibly forever, as a result of this hurricane. Want to bring it back to the studios with my coworker Mike Bettis. Mike, you've been through a lot of storms. We've all been through a lot of storms, and Louisiana knows it like nobody else, for sure. There have been a lot of comparisons to Hurricane Katrina, obviously, because we're coming in on the 16-year anniversary tomorrow. And here we have another storm that has a lot of similarities. That said, every storm has its own unique characteristics. Every storm has slightly different impacts. This one, I think, in size, hopefully, is a little bit smaller than Katrina, but a similar track, perhaps.
I think the thing about it is, it's where it may hit, I think, is what kind of concerns everybody, right? And on the date, it could come very similar to where Katrina hit. And I think you're right there. I think there are some similarities. I think there are a lot of differences as well. And I'll kind of walk you through those. When you take a look at where we stand, right? We're at 105-mile-per-hour hurricane right now. At this time, the night before landfall of Katrina, it was a Cat 5. All right? So at 105 miles per hour, we're Category 2. So we're 3 categories lower than what Katrina was at this point. And this storm is a little bit smaller than Katrina. And what I'm going to show you here is Hurricane Ida's forecast. All right? So there's the forecast. But then I also want to show you a close-up, and I'm going to overlay Katrina's track. And that's important, right? Because the angle of approach makes a difference. So, and I'll say this. Katrina spent 2 days as a major hurricane, Cat 3, 4, or 5, up through landfall, right? 2 days before it was a Cat 3, ramped up to a 4, then a 5, then gradually a weekend before landfall. Ida hasn't even got to Category 3 yet, okay? And coming in at an angle like this is actually, believe it or not, better than it would be if it was coming in perpendicular to the shore like Katrina did. Katrina came in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take this map and I'm going to widen it out just a little bit, because the angle of approach is important. There's Katrina that came off the Florida coast, and then it curved and came in perpendicular, where you're then going to maximize the storm surge, which you may not necessarily do in Ida. Okay? The other thing about it is this. That really pumped in a ton of storm surge in a place like coastal Mississippi. The other thing is, and I'll zoom back down in again a little bit for you, it came in on the east side of New Orleans. So when the hurricane came in like this, well, what did we do with the storm surge? We brought it in this way. It pushed Lake Pontchartrain south into New Orleans. On our current forecast track, if it goes this way, say west of New Orleans, what we'll end up doing is pushing Pontchartrain northbound. So, Jackie, there are differences here. Size matters, for sure. Angle of approach matters, for sure. Intensity matters. And so those things, I think the one thing that you can say is, yes, could they landfall in similar spots, or maybe just tens of miles apart from each other? I think so. But Ida is a different animal than Katrina was. A lot of Katrina's effects were baked in before it ever made landfall.
Right. You know, something else I think, Mike, too, that a lot of these really large hurricanes do is they wobble. And those wobbles can make a huge difference as to whether or not they go right or left of a city, which can mean all the difference if you're on the good side of the storm or the dirty side of the storm, so to speak. Some of these wobbles are going to be possible going forward as the storm intensifies.
A wobble close to land is concerning because then you could change places as where the eye wall, where the maximum winds come in. And so we're watching that very closely because it seems like this may trend on the eastern side of the cone, but could that just be a wobble? The convection is really starting to build all the way around it. You may get more of a straighter line at this point, but coastal Louisiana, coastal Mississippi, heads up. More coverage right after this.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage of Hurricane Ida. I'm meteorologist Jackie Jarris. I'm live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where we are under a hurricane warning right now. Folks have been busy here all day preparing and getting ready, and some deciding to evacuate and just get out of town because they're too concerned about the risks. Our big risks here are going to be damaging winds in excess of 100 miles per hour, but we'll also be very concerned about the heavy rainfall here. One thing we don't need to worry about, though, is storm surge, so that's a little bit of good news, but time is running out. As folks go to bed tonight, they need to be where they're going to be riding out this storm. Now, the city of New Orleans did not issue a mandatory evacuation order ahead of Ida. The mayor there says there just simply wasn't enough time to implement contraflow traffic.
The citywide evacuation plan cannot be implemented again because we're not calling for a mandatory evacuation because the time simply is not on our side. We do not want to have people on the road and therefore in greater danger because of the lack of time.
With no mandatory evacuation in place, people who didn't already leave are hunkering down. They're boarding up their windows and planning to ride out the storm there. Now, since New Orleans is below sea level and surrounded by water, the city's levee and pump system will be put to the test. City officials say the pumps are working and they are preparing for the worst.
So typically, our system is designed to pump about ½ inch per hour on a steady fashion. However, we know that that doesn't always happen, and the rate and the intensity often is much higher than that, and that's obviously what concerns us. Obviously, we're going to try to keep up with that storm. We have drawn down our canals to create more room for storage, and we're going to optimize as many of the available pumps, like you said, the 96 pumps, as much as possible to stay ahead of it.
Now, the city's levee system is complex, and it is designed to protect them from, they consider, at least a Category 3 hurricane. Of course, it's critical to protecting the city. Here's a closer look at how those levees work. Like the roads and bridges you use every day, levees are just another piece of the infrastructure often taken for granted. Until there's a problem. Levees are surprisingly common in the U.S. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers says 1 out of 5 counties have levees. About 100,000 miles of levees wind their way across the nation. But the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is responsible for just 14,400 miles, or about 15%. The remaining 85,000 or so miles fall under many different local, state, and federal jurisdictions. At their simplest, a levee is just a pile of dirt or wall of concrete meant to hold back the water.
There are 4 primary reasons why levees fail. They include seepage, stability, erosion, and height.
Water can seep through the levee, weakening the structure from within. When a section of levee slides away, that's called a stability failure. So-called toe erosion can steepen the levee slope until the now unstable structure collapses. Finally, the levee just isn't high enough. Water flows over the top, causing the levee to fail from the top down. But most well-maintained levees don't fail, and today hundreds of communities depend on levees for their livelihoods and even their lives. So hopefully all of that will work the way it was designed to do so and protect the city. Of course, we have to worry about the rainfall and flooding, that those pumps also work and are able to keep up with the rate of all of this rainfall. And Julie, I might want to mention, while no mandatory evacuation then could be put in place for the city of New Orleans, there are some spots in the city that are outside of the levee system, and a mandatory evacuation order had already been put into place for those people. Of course, one of the problems is there are a lot of folks there that don't really have the means to be able to evacuate without help from the government.
Still, though, traffic has been really busy along I-10, so that is a good sign. The airport in New Orleans was packed as well throughout the day, so hopefully people have found ways to get out of harm's way. All right, we want to talk a little bit about New Orleans itself, when we can expect some of those impacts. And of course, tropical storm force wind gusts expected to arrive starting tomorrow morning, lasting all the way through Monday. Hurricane force wind gusts arriving by tomorrow afternoon, lasting throughout much of the evening. We are looking at 8 to 12 inches of rain. Could see higher totals than that, maybe 15, 16 inches of rainfall coming into southern Louisiana as a result of Ida. So anyone not in that flood protection zone, that levee protection zone, boy, it is going to be very, very tough in terms of the flood threat for you. Looking at future radar, watching the storm, some of those outer bands coming in, maybe even as early tomorrow morning, you'll start to feel the winds pick up, the rain continuing to fall. There's Ida. This is this high-res model picking up on this around 3 o'clock, coming in, taking it right over Homa there, and then continuing to keep it just a bit east of New Orleans as far as the eye is concerned. Now, the north right front quadrant of that storm, though, that is where a lot of the active weather is going to be, a lot of that moisture as well. That's all coming in, and that's going to happen regardless of that. So we're looking at New Orleans really getting inundated, really socked with a ton of rain out of this, and those pumps are going to be working overtime to pump out all of that water. How much rain again? A foot to a foot and a half. By the way, we are going to get the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center. That is coming in any minute now. We're going to bring that to you live right here on the Weather Channel to see where Ida's headed.
So what do you expect to come back to?
If that thing doesn't change course and comes right up Terrebonne Bay, not much. So we got everything off the walls, out the closets that's, you know, valuable, and that's what we're bringing home. So it's, we haven't been this nervous since Andrew.
Yeah, think about the anxiety there. That is the sentiment from many as Ida nears the Gulf Coast. This was the scene outside of New Orleans as people took to the roads and packed the airport ahead of Ida. Take a look at that. Certainly packed there in the New Orleans airport, and the roads a steady stream on I-10 there. All right, I'm getting word we have the latest advisory coming in from the National Hurricane Center, Mike.
We do. Not a lot has changed, okay? So the wind speeds have remained the same. We still have a 105-mile-per-hour hurricane, Category 2. But what's changed in the last two advisories is the pressure continues to drop, but the winds are not correspondingly going up. So what I think may happen overnight tonight, we may continue to see a pressure drop, and then you're going to see a big jump in wind speed here, because what you notice on the satellite is becoming a lot more symmetrical around an eye that's formed right in there, okay? So now you start starting to get convection all around the center. I think you got a deepening low pressure, a storm that's intensifying, a little pin dot of an eye at this point, and then strong convection forming on the outer bands as well. So I think we have an intensifying hurricane. The winds just haven't gone up as we might expect them to with the pressure that's dropping. So as we stand right now, still a Category 2, 105-mile-per-hour winds. So again, I think this is all kind of going as we might expect it to, and I do think that the winds will pick up overnight tonight. I think we will get to a Category 3 overnight tonight. There again, a look at the track. Forecast now, inland would be 100 miles per hour, but I think that we're going to see the winds come up still a tick before landfall, and I think almost assuredly a Category 3 at landfall, if not a little bit higher than that. And as far as the surge goes, you can see in here, maximum storm surge 10 to 15 feet, coastal Louisiana. And then if you notice over here as well, we're going to see 7 to 11 feet that could work its way over into Mississippi. And I think that's a big concern with the winds that could be pushing a lot of water into coastal Mississippi. We remember after Katrina, a lot of water was pushed into these locations, devastating coastal Mississippi. So let's do some specifics, if we can, on Mississippi. I want to take you over toward the Waveland and Bay St. Louis areas. If you remember during Katrina, wiped out. I mean, any place that was in about a quarter mile of the water, wiped out just about. All right, so let's break this down and take you through it. A couple of areas of concern. That's going to be up here around, say, the Shoreline Park. All this area right in here, densely populated with homes. Could be looking at 6 to 9 feet of water inundation in these areas. The thing is, all these streets that you see in here, they're also canals that go through these neighborhoods. So water's going to come up, and it's going to come up quickly. This is a coastal preserve over here. Very sparse homes, if almost no homes. But I think that right along Highway 90, you're going to get some flooding along Highway 90. Again, no homes north of Highway 90 in the coastal preserve. Hancock County Jail sits right over here. I think they too will be okay. And the thing about Highway 90 is, relatively speaking, somewhat elevated. So flooding along Highway 90 wouldn't necessarily be a concern, except right where the coastal preserve is, all right? Another thing to point out for you, a couple of areas of concern. I want to point out right here. Hollywood Casino, okay, sits right on the water. The issue at Hollywood Casino is we could be looking at 6 to 9 feet of water rise here. There's also an RV park that sits there. Got to evacuate or they'll be underwater. Now right here along North Beach Boulevard, here, two different scenarios for North Beach Boulevard, okay? And here's the reason why. Right here is where Washington Street Pier is. Now, right in this area, we've got a seawall, okay? So that's going to protect us to some degree, including there at the Catholic Church that sits right there. I think you might be okay. The issue, though, when you go south, right here along North Beach Boulevard, the issue there is no seawall any longer. It's just dunes, and small dunes at that. So I think you're going to get some water inundation potentially here, and there are some homes here that have a little bit of rise off of North Beach Boulevard, but not a ton, okay? So I'd be worried about a block, maybe 2 blocks inland where the terrain is the shallowest, okay? Over here, north of Highway 90, we've got Bay Waveland Yacht Club. It'll be underwater. The boat's got to come out because that's a problem right there. But ultimately, I think a lot of places just north of Highway 90 should be okay, except near the coastal preserve. Then all these homes right through here, I think you stand a good chance of not getting much water in those locations. I think if the water's coming in this direction like this, I think you'll have issues right along North Beach. Otherwise, I think you could be in good shape until you get up toward the north side, where all this coastal preserve is just going to push water in. Again, it'll depend upon the angle of approach, how long we stay in it, how intense still the hurricane becomes. But these are areas that you'd worry about in a place like Bay St. Louis. Now, tides, because tides aren't extreme like they might be on the east coast of the U.S., I'm not sure that low tide and high tide are going to matter all that much with this, but maybe to some advantages around landfall time. We'll be at low tide in Bay St. Louis. I mean, every little bit helps in this instance, but, you know, our tide cycles aren't really big in this part of the country, so I'm not sure it makes a huge difference. To New Orleans we go for you tonight. There's a look at the French Quarter. Almost a ghost town tonight as large portions of the metro evacuate and hunker down. More coverage of Category 2 Hurricane Ida right after this. And welcome back, everyone. New advisories come in from the Hurricane Center on Hurricane Ida. Maybe some good news here is that the wind speeds have not increased. So we're still standing at a Category 2, 105 mile per hour winds. The one thing that might be a little concerning is that the pressure continues to drop, which means we have a deepening low pressure. And a deepening low pressure usually means you're going to see the winds intensify. And I think they will overnight tonight. I still think that's going to happen. It's still forecast to be a Category 4 hurricane at landfall, winds at 130 miles per hour. So keep in mind there are going to be some intensifying winds as we go through the night. The one thing that you'll notice on the satellite there is that you were starting to get a lot more convection coming around the eye itself. There's a look, by the way, at the forecast. And tomorrow morning, right offshore, 130 mile per hour winds coming inland and coming past New Orleans. I mean, look at this. By Sunday evening, still 100 mile per hour winds inland here. So we're still talking Cat 2 winds as it may come very near New Orleans in this forecast, then quickly diminishing after that. But not much has changed here. It's gotten a lot closer to shore here, but not a lot has changed in the last advisory. We'll get another advisory in the next 3 hours here, but 145 miles south-southeast of the mouth of the Mississippi. We stick way out here at Burris, and then we've got, Grand Isle, Louisiana here. But one thing you're going to start to notice here, if you're watching us from the coast, is that there's now going to be more of a push of water. The water's going to start to come up here, and as the hurricane gets closer, you're certainly going to see a push of water here. Coastal Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, into Louisiana as well, and I think there could be real issues at Lake Pontchartrain as well, pushing water north. The difference may be, especially if we keep in our current forecast here, which would bring the hurricane just to the west of New Orleans, that'll increase our push of water into coastal Louisiana, but it's also going to push Pontchartrain north, as you recall in Katrina. Because Katrina went in this direction, the water was pushed to the south on the backside of Katrina. So that could be a big difference. In this case, it was pushing water down into New Orleans instead of away from New Orleans on the north side of Pontchartrain. Having said that, if you live on the north side of Pontchartrain, you're very concerned now of what may happen, including an intensifying hurricane. Close-up view, we're going to analyze around the center. You can see an eye is now starting to form. And the other thing that we're now starting to get, you see the dark colors are really starting to encircle the hurricane at this point. But now what we're also getting is a lot more white. That color code corresponds with cloud height. So basically what it's measuring is temperature in the atmosphere. And so it basically the software, if you will, corresponds a color code to a temperature. So the higher you get these thunderstorm clouds around the center, the colder it is at the top, right? And so now you're starting to get some white colors or some gray colors starting to feed in to the color table here, which tells you now we're really building the eye wall in this. And I think that's another sign that we likely have an intensifying hurricane along with the pressure drop here. Now, the hurricane planes that are out there will confirm that, but I think ultimately we're definitely going to get higher wind speeds to come. And you're now starting to see on the radar, can you see far left-hand side of your screen, starting to see that opening, that clearing in the center. So I think that also another sign that things are getting worse with this hurricane. The other thing that we're getting now are severe thunderstorm warnings. These outer bands, tall thunderstorms in these outer bands as well, and you can see that from the lightning that's in them. The thing about these thunderstorms, and here's that severe thunderstorm warning, by the way, in Mobile County. The thing about these thunderstorms is these outer bands are the bands that are most likely to contain severe weather, including tornadoes. So be aware of that risk for us as well. The tornado threat for us through tomorrow, toward count of 3 now. That's going to include southern Mississippi and then southeastern Louisiana. Gulfport, Pascagoula, Biloxi, Hattiesburg, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Grand Isle, Houma. These are all places where you have a tornado risk through tonight, I think tomorrow as well. Talking about that push of water, storm surge warnings here. Pecan Island over through Grand Isle. We've got issue. Now, New Orleans, we do not have a storm surge warning right in New Orleans, largely due to the levee system there and the flood risk reduction system that they have. It's not foolproof. I want to say that. It's not foolproof, but also notice we have storm surge warnings north side of Pontchartrain, and then the warnings that extend through coastal Mississippi and then through Mobile Bay as well. So, Jackie, maybe some good news and some bad news with the latest advisory. Track is staying similar. We haven't intensified the winds, which for now I think is a good sign, but knowing that the pressure is dropping, that the convection around the eye is deepening, I think those are signs that strengthening is coming overnight tonight.
Yes, great analysis, Mike, and I'm so glad that you make those points because it worries me a little bit that people are, tuning in before they go to bed tonight and they're saying, oh, the wind speeds haven't gone up. It's still 105 miles per hour. It's a Category 2. This isn't going to be as bad as I thought. That's not the case. All signs are still pointing to this becoming a major hurricane that is in that process of intensifying. And a lot of times when that pressure drops, there's a little bit of lag time sometimes before that wind speed then corresponds to that and begins to increase. So undoubtedly that will happen a little bit later on for tonight. Now, I'm here live in Baton Rouge. We're along the Mississippi River. This is a major thoroughfare, Interstate 10 over the River Bridge, where we've had constant traffic today. A lot of those folks actually from New Orleans that are working their way westward as they prepare. And folks here in Baton Rouge need to be very seriously prepared as well. In fact, our winds ultimately could possibly be even stronger. We're talking 100-mile-per-hour winds potentially here that could cause a lot of damage. Now, the mayor, Sharon Weston Broome, had this to say today about preparations.
I don't want anyone to take this for granted. Right now, as you notice out here, it's nice. It's a nice evening out here in Baton Rouge. But we want everyone to know that the window is closing in terms of preparation. So don't wait till tomorrow. Make sure you're prepared by now, hunker down, and let's just see what happens tomorrow.
Yeah, be done. I hope that you're done. There's actually a lot of people that are walking along the riverfront here for tonight, just trying to enjoy some of the nice weather. We've actually really had nice weather in Baton Rouge today. They were filling up sandbags, the long lines at the gas stations. It took me a while at the grocery store to get some of those items. So I do think folks here are taking it very seriously. And the center of the storm is going to get very near Baton Rouge, and we're going to have tornado-like conditions potentially tomorrow, especially in the late afternoon, maybe the evening and early overnight hours. That's going to be the big window here where we're going to see some of the worst of the conditions, not to mention the torrential downpours and the flooding rains that are going to be expected that will last for hours and hours and hours. Now, New Orleans, just about 80 miles or so off towards our east, and that's where we find meteorologist Jim Cantore on how that city is getting ready for Ida.
A pretty nice night here in New Orleans, but boy, what is looming offshore is not nice at all. Things we're seeing tonight, the entire French Quarter shut down, restaurants, bars here in the city that people come to kind of relieve a little stress. The New Orleans and the Natchez both kind of sitting here on the shoreline in port where they would normally be enjoying a nice little river cruise, especially during the daytime hours. Either way you slice it, this area is going to deal with a hurricane, whether they deal with the right front quadrant or the eye wall or the outskirts of that. There will be big impacts in through here. First of all, rainfall. This is a city that sits 8 feet below sea level. Can we pump 10 to 15 inches of rain out of the city? That's the first question. 96 and 99 pumps are working. The other question is, you have many, many hospitals here around New Orleans, 30 of them. They are full of patients, many with COVID. Should we lose power? Should we need to get them out of a flood situation? That will be a daunting task, to say the least. So these are things we will be watching as this storm potentially grows overnight into a major hurricane. That's the forecast, and that's what's coming ashore in Louisiana sometime on Sunday. The anniversary of Hurricane Katrina 16 years ago to the date. How eerie is that? Reporting from the Riverwalk in New Orleans, I'm meteorologist Jim Cantore.
You know, it really does make your heart sink when you think about that happening, that here we are facing another major hurricane, likely with huge impacts for the city of New Orleans on the anniversary of Katrina as well. But also, in a way, maybe that helps a little bit, right? Because we think more about Katrina and just how devastating that was for the city, that hopefully folks who had the means were able to evacuate and get out of there, even though a mandatory evacuation order was not able to be issued in time, and that folks are as prepared as they possibly can be for all the impacts that they can expect. So, Julie, let's bring it back to you. I know you're going to talk a little bit more about what New Orleans can expect.
Yeah, and Jackie, real quick, you know, I know you've been driving around Baton Rouge, and one thing that struck me about visiting there, all the big, beautiful trees. I don't know if you happen to notice, but that is also a concern, right, when it comes to power outages, because if those trees start coming down, yes, they really have their work cut out for them.
Yes, they have been doing work ahead of time, trying to trim up the trees. The power crews have brought people in from other states to be ready to try and restore that power just as soon as they can. But, you know, with winds that could exceed 100 miles per hour, Julie, that can cause a lot of damage and can cause a lot of damage to the infrastructure. So they're warning that people do need to be prepared that if they're riding the storm out here, that they may not have power for days, perhaps even more than a week.
We hope that's not the case, but now's the time, right, to prepare, get those supplies, get everything you need, and really hunker down. All right, Jackie, we'll check back with you. Thanks so much for that. We want to focus in now on New Orleans as well. And of course, with this being the anniversary of Katrina 16 years ago, a lot of people on edge, I'm sure, in this part of the world. So looking at our future radar coming in now, some of those outer bands coming in the early morning hours, a lot of rainfall associated with Ida. There's the eye coming in, this model taking it maybe somewhere over Homa, so still to the west of New Orleans, but this could wobble back eastward as well. This is not set in stone yet, so that's something we're going to have to really just fine tune and follow closely. Either way, the rain is coming. That is going to be a big issue for you in New Orleans, all of those southern parishes as well. So here's a look at Sunday evening, 7 o'clock. We're still dealing with hurricane force winds, 125 mile per hour winds still in a place like Homa, Morgan City, still dealing with maybe 100 mile per hour wind gusts coming your way. New Orleans still pretty rough with the winds as well. So power outages are going to occur here in these areas, and that is something you're just going to have to prepare yourself for. Hopefully you've already done that, or you've gotten out of harm's way. And if you're not in that levee protection zone, hopefully you have heeded those evacuation warnings and gotten out, or are in the process of doing so, because that window is closing quickly here. This is 9 o'clock, still in the thick of it with the rain, likely the wind continuing as well. Really going to be lasting until those early morning hours on Monday. So that rainfall piling up at an area that is below sea level. The pumps are the only thing that's going to get that water out of the city of New Orleans, and they're going to be working overtime, I'm afraid, as well. Really being tested in this case. So we're talking about a foot or more of rainfall coming into these low-lying areas. Could see as much as 12, 16 inches of rainfall in some areas. So again, in a place like New Orleans, where we're dealing with some of those areas outside of that levee protection zone, we're going to be dealing with flooding here. Flooding, power outages, winds, trees coming down, as I was just talking with Jackie about. Really just could be a catastrophic situation setting up here in and around New Orleans. So we're looking at tropical storm force gusts starting tomorrow morning, then switching over to hurricane force gusts. We could be dealing with, 100 mile per hour gusts easily, and then a foot of rain on top of that as well. So the power situation will be compromised. Also going to be dealing with the storm surge here. Now, some of these areas are protected, Mike, as you know, in and around those southern parishes of New Orleans. They've had to rebuild a lot of these seawalls and levees since Katrina. However, not everyone's going to be protected in a case like this.
And the system's never really been tested, right? And this may be that test, right? But what a sight in the French Quarter of New Orleans tonight. Normally just absolutely teeming with people on a Saturday evening. There's nobody there. And that's a good sign. I take that as a good sign that, listen, people are really paying attention. People are doing what they can to get out of harm's way. We've got to, in situations like this, knowing that we're so vulnerable. Let's break down the winds of Ida for you. Again, currently the winds are 105 miles per hour as it sits offshore. We can expect right at the tip here of Louisiana, tropical storm force winds of roughly 40 miles an hour to begin about 2 a.m. All right. For New Orleans, your tropical storm force winds begin in the morning. Follow that black line right there. Baton Rouge, middle of the day tomorrow. That's tropical storm force winds, a lower category than hurricane winds, but what is the probability of hurricane winds for us here? So a place like Grand Isle, or maybe Port Fourchon or Homa, I think you've got an 80 to 90% chance that you're going to get hurricane force winds. But even up here, in this kind of dark yellow color, you still have a 50% shot of getting hurricane force winds. And I think that includes a place like New Orleans and Baton Rouge. And as Julie was mentioning, I don't think that wind gusts of 100 miles per hour out of the question in New Orleans. In fact, with this graphic here, we depict wind gusts to 110 being the possibility for you. That that will cause damage. Trees will be toppled, power lines will come down, roofs will be torn off of homes, you will lose power. In the red area, 110-mile-per-hour winds are possible. 74 to 110 is a Cat 1 to a Cat almost Cat 3. That's the highest end Cat 2. But then notice here, all the way past I-20, Shreveport, Monroe, Starkville, you could be looking at very strong winds that could be over 70 miles per hour, which would be a very strong thunderstorm. So here's why we're worried about all of that, because widespread power outages are possible here. In the purple area, I think it is possible that you could go in some neighborhoods weeks without power because we're anticipating the winds to maximize basically at landfall. Likely winds to cause outages from Gulfport to Jackson to Monroe to Alexandria to Lake Charles, and there's still a possibility of power outages all the way up to Memphis and Tupelo as a result of Hurricane Ida. Be prepared to go without power if you're operating a generator, only outside. Make sure you're pointing the exhaust away from your home. More on Ida after this.
You can't stop a force of nature. This hurricane season, rely on one of your own. It's a fact. No other news network out there is trusted more than the Weather Channel.
This is epic.
Trusted to give you every advantage before the storm. Trusted to be there where and when you need us. Trusted to work around the clock until every threat is over.
We're in this for the long haul.
Because America doesn't trust hurricane season to just anyone.
Welcome back as we track Hurricane Ida for you tonight, a Category 2 hurricane bearing down on Louisiana and Mississippi coastlines here. This is a look at Moss Point, Mississippi. This is right along I-10 as evacuations are underway. As this hurricane approaches, you can see it is bumper to bumper tonight as people are trying to get out of harm's way. This is what we should be doing. We should be getting out of harm's way as quickly as we can, especially running from that storm surge, finding a safe location inland where you don't have a risk of inland flooding from storm surge or from rainfall flooding. And I would also recommend this, that you not evacuate to a location where you've got a lot of trees around, because we think with the winds that are coming in, trees going down will be a major concern. We see this happen time and time again, that someone unfortunately is injured or even worse when a tree falls on their home. So again, if you're evacuating, we think that is fantastic. You should be doing that if you're in a storm surge location or an evacuation zone, but make sure you're evacuating to another location that is also safe for you. Again, welcome back, everyone, to our continuing coverage of Hurricane Ida. I'm meteorologist Mike Bettis alongside meteorologist Julie Martin and meteorologist Jackie Jarris, who is in Baton Rouge, Louisiana for us tonight, tracking Ida. You know, it's kind of one of those moments, Jackie, where the night before landfall, you just hold your breath because you know when you wake up in the morning, things are going to be different and your life is going to change.
Yes. Yes, tomorrow, this time, things are going to be very different from what they are today. It really is that cliche, you know, the calm before the storm. And people have seemed very calm here in Baton Rouge. They've been getting things done, that's for sure. Sandbags, many locations were open and available today. They were filling up. They had to bring more sand in because that's how many people were coming in and filling up their bags. Long lines at the gas stations, of course, long lines at the grocery store with people stocking up on their supply of water and non-perishable items to get them through what could very likely be multiple days without power. In addition to that, while Baton Rouge here was not told to evacuate, they may have a curfew that goes into effect tomorrow. But this interstate right behind me, this is the Interstate 10 River Bridge, and you can still see, you know, we're past, 10 o'clock at night, and we have got car after car after car still going through. So this is often a major thoroughfare where people from the coastal areas, but also from New Orleans, go westward to try and get away. You can also keep in mind, you can go north and you can go east. So there are a lot of options, but Baton Rouge is not a good place for folks to evacuate to, because we're going to have some huge impacts here. Now, one of the big impacts that we're expecting is going to be the heavy rainfall that will likely lead to some flash flooding. It's the Mississippi River that's behind me. We're on the east bank of the Mississippi River, and it's high enough here, and the river is not expected to flood enough and cause any major issues. But we've got other rivers nearby that do tend to do that and are forecast to do it. The Amite, as well as the Comite and the Tickfaw also. Those are some of the rivers that are forecast to get up to flood stage, possibly moderate flood. So folks in low-lying areas need to pay very particular attention to that. Now, rainfall is going to be extremely heavy. We're talking about a range of rainfall likely somewhere between 6 to as much as maybe 16 inches of rainfall, depending on where that center tracks on through here. Some of the outer bands are likely to be arriving by early tomorrow morning, and that could bring initial heavy rainfall, but we'll likely experience hours of consistent rainfall as that center goes over us or very near us. So that's going to be one of the big concerns going forward, is that we may have too much rain, especially over a period of time where the rainfall rates are so heavy that it could just overwhelm the system. Now, while I'm here on the riverbanks, also across the street from me is the river center, and folks from the Red Cross are setting up there. They're going to make that an evacuation area where folks can come and seek refuge if they don't have a safe place to be. We could have tornado-like conditions at times, Mike, so, you know, being in a mobile home would not be okay. The hotel clerk at our front desk when we checked in, Mike, she lives in a mobile home, and she decided she's going to stay at work to ride out the storm.
It's a very smart thing to do, because even if we're not seeing tornadoes, just some of the wind gusts alone could be enough to damage a mobile home. So very, very wise of her to do that, for sure. Jackie, thank you. And talking about the rain that we're going to see, it is going to be very intense, and it's going to go far inland for a lot of us, unfortunately. Take a look at the footprint of Ida's rain. Most intense is going to be down through Louisiana and Mississippi, and then it starts to taper as it goes north, but it's still quite heavy here, unfortunately. Heavy rain around Tupelo. We think we get some heavy rain through Middle Tennessee, Middle Tennessee. After what we've been through in the past week, this is not the forecast that we want to see. Coming up through Kentucky, then spreading all its way into the northeast. Take a look at what the high-resolution radar is anticipating. Boy, it's amazing what we can do these days with the modeled forecast, right? Monday morning now, so we're going to go Monday morning, not tomorrow morning. Center of circulation likely to be somewhere here, maybe near I-55 or just west of it, with the heaviest of rain east of it. So along 55, but extending over into Alabama as well. Be prepared for severe weather in those instances, as well as 1 to 2 inch rainfall rates per hour. So center of circulation kind of falling apart at this point, but now Middle Tennessee getting hammered Tuesday morning, I think, and this is going to cause some flooding for us here. Flooding with these lines of storms that could be approaching Atlanta mid-morning on Tuesday. Jackson, up to 5 inches of rain coming our way. Be ready along I-20. Welcome back, everyone, as you track Hurricane Ida for you tonight. I want to show you some live cameras here. This one right at the Mississippi and Louisiana state line. Slow go tonight here through Mississippi, as everyone is, it seems like, getting out of harm's way. We like to see that. Hopefully you can get to your destination safely tonight, as a lot of people are getting out of harm's way. Then we take you over the causeway here over Lake Pontchartrain. This is going to go on the right-hand side of your screen. That's the traffic going northbound here out of New Orleans, across Lake Pontchartrain. Now, a little more sporadic traffic here, but hopefully maybe you spent the day today going ahead, get everything done, and you've already evacuated. If you haven't, you still have time tonight to evacuate. Check the traffic before you go and make sure that you can get to the location you want to get to safely and without delay. Getting stuck on the roadways is just no fun when you're trying to get out of the path of a hurricane, that's for sure. We know tonight New Orleans braces for Ida's impacts. The city's Director of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, Colin Arnold, joins us live with some steps that residents there are taking ahead of this hurricane. Colin, thanks for being with us. I mean, there's very little time at this point. What are you recommending for your residents?
They need to get where they're going if they need to get off the road soon or get where their destination is if they've evacuated. And they certainly need to shelter in place now. It's already almost 11 o'clock here. We've said by midnight, and we think that that's a good thing to stick by. I took a walk downtown here just about an hour ago, and it's very quiet.
I know because of the nature of the hurricane and the timing and what have you, contraflow was not something that you were able to do. Have you any update on traffic, how that is tonight? We showed a couple live cameras there. Some highways are a little bit more congested than others.
No, certainly the traffic has been very heavy. Been in contact with our State Department of Transportation and Development a few times today. We're working on some things, trying to get some data about the amount of vehicles on the road to maybe take that data and use it about how many people are in the city. And then we can figure out, if necessary, what our next moves are with post-storm evacuation. We're already setting up contingencies for that in case it's needed.
Colin, the storm that we have tonight, and maybe people are going to bed tonight, it's a Category 2, 105-mile-per-hour winds. They may wake up tomorrow to potentially a Category 4. What would that mean for New Orleans, and how significant do you think the damage could be or power outages? What are you anticipating there?
I'm concerned about the power outages, particularly long-term power outages. We've been through that before, and we're a resilient city. Obviously, it's an anniversary tomorrow that is very meaningful to this city, but it's also, an anniversary that reminds us to stay prepared. That said, obviously power outages are a concern, structure damage is a concern, and, rainfall, heavy rainfall, particularly in short periods of time, can overwhelm our system. But right now, we're looking pretty good with our pumps and our power situation.
We know that there has been maybe some criticism about not being able to get everyone out of harm's way in evacuation procedures. What do you tell people that are staying tonight? What should they be doing tonight and tomorrow?
We saw people out for several days gathering supplies, doing what they need to do to be ready, getting sandbags, everything that they can do to be prepared. We were tested a lot last year. We've been tested over the past few years. What I would say now is you've done your preparation. It's time to shelter in place, ride this out, and then we'll address what we need to address on Monday.
Colin, specifically, what does shelter in place mean for somebody in New Orleans?
To get into your home, into the safest place possible, and to stay there and be prepared for 72 hours, 3 days. They're on you to have food, water, medications, and what you need to be self-sufficient for the next couple days.
Colin, thanks so much for being with us tonight. That's Colin Arnold, Director of New Orleans Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. Good advice there. You heard him say, be prepared to be on your own for 3 days in this storm. That's saying a lot for sure. Let's show you what's happening currently. I know that you're interested in the stats, where it's going, all those things. 105-mile-per-hour winds right now, Category 2. Pressure has been dropping. That's a bad sign. That means the pressure is dropping. I think that the winds will correspondingly go up. We're now getting the eye well formed here. We're getting concentric circular convection. I know that's a lot of fancy meteorological terms, but it's a lot of thunderstorms surrounding the eye, in essence, is what that means, which means it is intensifying. One thing that you'll notice on this satellite view is that we now have a lot more gray color around the eye. Tall thunderstorms are now encircling the eye, and so what we're getting is intensifying hurricane. I think the wind speeds, almost a no-brainer, go up tonight. Some of the outer bands of thunderstorms have been quite intense. We at one point had a severe thunderstorm warning here around Gulf Shores, Alabama. These outer bands could produce tornadoes. I want you to be aware of that threat overnight tonight. Have a way to be alerted if there's a tornado issued for your area on your mobile device or on a NOAA weather radio. More on Ida right after this.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage of Hurricane Ida. I'm meteorologist Jackie Jarris. I'm live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We're on the east bank of the Mississippi River here. We're about 80 miles inland, but major impacts are expected in Baton Rouge. This is not just a New Orleans storm. This is not just a coastal storm. We're going to have big impacts well inland. In fact, our winds here could reach as much as 100 miles per hour and cause extensive damage, extensive power outages that will likely last for days, if not more than a week. In addition to that, our rainfall here is expected to be extremely heavy as well. We could have a half of a foot to as much as a foot or more of rainfall, leading to flooding when all is said and done. Now, no evacuations here in Baton Rouge. They say hide from the wind, but run from the water. We do want to focus in on that situation in New Orleans, where the city did not issue a mandatory evacuation order ahead of Ida, because the mayor there simply says there just wasn't enough time to implement the contraflow.
The National Weather Service, as well as the governor of the state of Louisiana, have indicated that our time for even implementing contraflow, we don't have the time to do so. Therefore, the city cannot issue a mandatory evacuation because we don't have the time.
With no mandatory evacuation in place, people who didn't already leave are having to hunker down now, boarding up their windows, planning to ride the storm out. Now, since New Orleans is below sea level and surrounded by water, the city's levee and pump system will be put to the test. If city officials say the pumps are working and they're preparing for the worst.
The reality is that if it's anything more, in the tone of 5 or 6 inches an hour, the system will be overwhelmed and we will experience some flooding throughout the city. And our mission obviously shifts from draining the, obviously, keeping the city dry to draining the city as fast as we can.
So a huge project was underway to reinforce and rebuild the levee system to help protect New Orleans from a Category 3 storm or better. That will be tested this time around. And Julie, I might want to mention, I know you were talking about this a little bit earlier, is after the new advisory, we've seen a new statement from the National Weather Service in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, talking about just how devastating this could actually be for the city.
Yeah, some very strong wording coming from the forecast office there, Jackie. In fact, I have it pulled up here, and just a couple of snippets. They say once tropical storm force winds move in, quote, you will be on your own. So, to be prepared for that, they say conditions could be unlivable along the coast for some time in areas around New Orleans and Baton Rouge. Could be without power for weeks. So again, very strong wording coming from the National Weather Service office there. They also say do not play around and say I've been through Andrew, Camille, Katrina, Betsy. All storms are different. So again, very strong words there. We look at New Orleans, though, and what we can expect. And here's a look at our future radar. Some of those outer bands arriving early tomorrow morning and then continuing as Ida draws closer. This particular model taking the eye there over maybe Homa, so west of New Orleans coming in, but certainly on the northeastern side of that, very heavy bands of rain and wind coming in and pushing through New Orleans and Baton Rouge, where Jackie's located, for several hours here throughout the day tomorrow. So by afternoon, and into the evening hours, again, if you are sheltering in place, really, your time is up as of tonight. We're going to start seeing those tropical storm force winds work their way into the areas by tomorrow morning. So again, we're looking at not only that, but a tornado threat, a torcon of 3. Lots of times during tropical systems, we do see these brief tornado spin ups. So that's something else certainly to be aware of. We've got a lot of water also coming into these areas that are below sea level. So the pumps are the only way we're going to be able to get the water out of a place like New Orleans. Looking again at the wind gust forecast here, we're looking at winds picking up by Sunday evening. Yeah, we're looking at winds in excess of 100 miles per hour at a place like Homa and Morgan City. New Orleans, you could be dealing with at least 75 mile per hour wind gusts, Trees are going to be a big concern in a place like Baton Rouge, where they could be falling on power lines, falling on homes. So don't just assume because you're in your home. If you are in a home surrounded by large trees, that's something to be really worried about, and try to maybe move elsewhere if you can. Monday morning, 4 a.m., still dealing with some winds here. They do start to back off a bit, but nonetheless, we've got a long way to go here before we can even think about maybe getting power crews out there, trying to restore power, working in tropical storm force wind conditions. It's just not, it's not doable. So again, that's why I think a lot of warning is going out at this early hour about the power outage situation, and it could be days, it could be weeks before the power is restored to these areas. The flood threat is real as well. We're looking at maybe a foot and a half of rain coming into southern Louisiana as a result of Ida. So again, if you're living outside of that flood protection zone, that levee protection zone, in those low-lying bayous and parishes, it is not going to be good news for you, I'm afraid, with all of this rainwater coming in. We've got Lake Pontchartrain there. We've got the Mississippi River. Again, all of those bayous. Mike Bettis was talking a lot about this earlier, too. And in some of these southern parishes are just filled with these small bayous. So that water builds up and it really has nowhere to go. So, again, flooding is going to be a real threat. We've just got multiple problems. A live look here in Louisiana as people are heading out of harm's way and Ida approaches.
Before now.
A real bad storm is a real bad storm, no matter when it hits. I mean, the ones in the 60s were horrible. We saw tornadoes that would precede it, and the tornadoes did more damage than the hurricanes. So it's about the same. I can't see any difference, and I've lived through them since the 60s.
Yeah, a strong reminder, though, of just how extremely important it is to prepare for Ida as it nears the Gulf Coast. This was the scene just north of New Orleans as residents evacuated some of the more vulnerable areas ahead of the hurricane. Long lines of vehicles there combed through the city of Slidell, Louisiana earlier as Louisiana officials urged people to leave before landfall. All right, let's check out the situation now. We're going to take you to Moss Point, Alabama. This is I-10. We are looking again at that traffic just flowing out onto I-10, continuing at this hour. Mind you, we are into the late night hours now, and some people still leaving town as they should. Now let's get you to the Lake Pontchartrain camera here, and you can see the headlights, and that's about it. Coming there across the causeway as well. So again, all of those areas in and around New Orleans that are not in that levee protection zone are under mandatory evacuations. A state of emergency there as Ida nears the coast, still a Category 2, but expected to intensify to a Category 4 perhaps. So we want to get you caught up though on what we know, some of the latest information we're getting in here at the Weather Channel. In New Orleans, officials are warning residents that are sheltering in place to not expect emergency help until 72 hours after the hurricane has passed. Louisiana's largest hospital system, Ochsner Health, has closed all of its urgent cares and clinics in at-risk areas through Monday. Meanwhile, St. Bernard Parish has already started to close area floodgates tonight. All right, let's get it over to Mike for the very latest on Ida and where it is now.
All right, thanks so much, Julie. We still have a Category 2 hurricane on our hands tonight, 105-mile-per-hour winds. That's not changed in the last couple of advisories from the Hurricane Center, but I think it will overnight tonight. I think we have an intensifying hurricane on our hands. The pressure's dropped in the last two advisories. We dropped 5 millibars in the last advisory, now 964 millibars right now. And just take a look at the hurricane, if you will. It really has a lot more symmetry to it than it once did, and so we're getting a lot of thunderstorms wrapping around the eye on all sides at this point, and so an intensifying hurricane with a deepening low. And I think that it maybe even in the very next advisory that we see the wind speeds kick up. Still forecasting this to be a Category 4 hurricane, maybe right at or right before landfall. It winds at 130 miles per hour tomorrow morning. I think the winds are going to be pretty darn close to that. And then you can see the track as it takes its way up into the Tennessee Valley and then the Northeast eventually, where heavy rain could fall there. Let's talk about the storm surge potential that we could see and how much water could inundate neighborhoods here. So coastal Louisiana, that could include a place like Grand Isle. 10 to 15 feet of water could be coming our way. Could that get close to a place like Ahoma? What about over into coastal Mississippi? 7 to 11 feet of water could be coming our way. Dr. Greg Postel breaks down the potentially catastrophic storm surge Ida could unleash here along the Gulf Coast.
Hurricane Ida is closing in on the northern Gulf Coast. Expect destructive winds and life-threatening storm surge. Storm surge warnings are up for parts of Louisiana and Mississippi. And let me show you what storm surge actually looks like. Let's bring that water up to 3 feet. 3 feet of water, very dangerous. It can float cars away, knock you off your feet. Who knows what's hiding in this water, and certainly can flood out parts of the first floors of homes and businesses. But let's bring that up even higher. Let's bring that up to 6 feet. 6 feet of water. That's as tall as I am, even higher than that. Life-threatening. Oftentimes, the only way to escape this is to go up if you can. Certainly, this can flood out the first floors of homes and businesses. But we know some places will see maybe storm surge as high as 9 feet or higher. That can put entire neighborhoods underwater. So make sure you prepare and get those preparations, rush them to completion, because there's only a handful of hours left before you can do that. Stay tuned to the latest forecast and follow the advice of the officials. If they ask you to evacuate, do so. Time is running out.
All right, Dr. Postel, thanks for that. Let's get local for you tonight. I want to take you to some spots where storm surge could be an issue. Now, about 50 miles from the very tip of Louisiana is Thibodaux. Sits right here. So how much water could we be anticipating? What would be the vulnerable locations? Well, I think along Main Street, mostly, we're in pretty good shape. There could be a few areas I'd be concerned about. I think that a place maybe like Nickel State, I think we're in pretty good shape there. I think we're pretty good shape at a place like maybe Bayou Country Club. But an area that I might be a little bit worried about could be a place, oh, maybe like right here. That is the Thibodaux High School. I think that 1 to 3 feet of water could be coming our way there. So think about that. 1 to 3 feet at the high school, I think, is possible. Also, a place that goes up Canal Boulevard. I think a place like the Walmart or the Lowe's, I think you're in pretty good shape. Go north of there, though. I think there could be issues because we sit right behind some low-lying farmland. I think a place like Academy Sports could potentially take on some water. A place like Sonic or maybe even Waffle House all sit right in this area right here. Be prepared for water in those locations. But ultimately, I think Thibodaux, because of our location and our distance from the shore, even though we sit right along Bayou Lafourche, I think we might be in pretty good shape here. We're back right after this.
Some have it.
Darkness is upon us tonight, and before the sun rises again, we'll start to feel the impacts from Hurricane Ida as it closes in on the Louisiana coastline. I'm meteorologist Jackie Jarris. I'm live in Baton Rouge, where preparations are pretty much finishing up now. We'll talk more about the timing and the wind impacts we can expect here coming up.
A forecast landfall in less than 24 hours on the Louisiana coast. And that landfall on the same day as Katrina came to New Orleans 16 years ago. This area has been preparing all day, but there are concerns that exist. Big concerns. We will talk about those coming up.
Well, we know that countless people along the Gulf Coast are boarding up, or they've packed up and they're leaving as a hit from a major hurricane less than a day away. It could bring extreme wind, flooding rain, 15 feet of storm surge in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. Time now quickly running out to finalize your preparations and hunker down for the duration of the hurricane. Let's take you live and show you what we're following, including the traffic out of Moss Point, Mississippi here, right near the Mississippi and Louisiana state line. Rain starting to come down for us as well. It has not been a fun drive. Now the weather's becoming a factor, and also there's heavy volume on the streets tonight. So getting out of harm's way is a slow go in many instances. All right, there's a look on your screen of where we think Ida is headed, what its intensity could be. Still forecasting a major hurricane tomorrow morning, 130-mile-per-hour winds. Upper left of your screen, a live look at the French Quarter in New Orleans. It is a ghost town tonight, nobody out. And then you see Slidell, Louisiana, where there has been some traffic as people again are trying to evacuate. We have hurricane warnings in effect here from Grand Isle to Morgan City, Baton Rouge to New Orleans. Hurricane warnings to go north of I-10, and then we have tropical storm warnings to go all the way north of I-20. That includes Macomb, Jackson, Monroe, includes Mobile and Gulf Shores, Alabama. So a lot to cover for you here tonight as we track Hurricane Ida for you. Thanks for being with us. I'm meteorologist Mike Bettis alongside meteorologist Julie Martin and Jackie Jarris. A lot of worries for us tonight, Jackie, in Louisiana, even in places like Baton Rouge. And we just showed the map there. Baton Rouge does not sit right on the water, but knowing that the winds are going to pick up, that is going to really knock out power to a lot of people in southern Louisiana.
Yes, New Orleans gets a lot of attention, but this is the capital city here in Louisiana. We've got a lot of people who live here, and even though the Gulf is 80 miles to the south here, we're going to be seeing hurricane force winds. We've got a hurricane warning in effect. A state of emergency has been declared here, and it's been a long and busy day getting prepared for winds that could exceed 100 miles per hour. So power outages on the top of the mind of people, not to mention the risk of a lot of the flash flooding as well. Power crews have been put in place. We've got high water rescue crews pre-positioned, getting ready as well. Earlier today, I talked to Mayor Broome about how the city is getting ready.
We are anticipating a curfew perhaps tomorrow night. There's not one in place tonight because we want everyone to get all the materials that they need in preparation for 3 days at least. And tomorrow we've already discussed the possibility of a curfew.
And hopefully all those preparations are done by this time. You know, there still are a few stragglers out here tonight walking along the riverfront. It's a beautiful evening. We got a little breeze. The storms have really held off for the most part here for today. But now is the time, if your preparations are done, to go to sleep, because you're not going to get a lot of sleep tomorrow night with strong winds, likely no power. And it's going to be, in essence, likely almost like a tornado. In fact, a tornado warning could end up getting issued just because of the strong eye wall. Could get very close or move over this area, so you need to shelter like it is that. I also want to mention that the last flight is expected to get out of Baton Rouge Airport tomorrow morning, and then all flights canceled after 10 a.m. Louisiana State University and Tulane are both closed. LSU's football team has gone to Houston for safety and for practice, but there are students who are staying here, and they're being ordered to shelter in place. And despite the fact that both those universities are closed, they are being provided meals as well. They've got plans in place and emergency crews to try and protect those students. I know there's a lot of parents across the country here tonight worried about those students. So they do need to be prepared, though, to lose power and be without power for days, maybe even a week or more ahead.
All right, Jackie, thanks so much for the update there. It is not going to be a fun time, that is for sure. And got to be ready for what's coming your way, that's for sure, because what we have tonight is not likely what we will have tomorrow morning when you wake up. We have a 105-mile-per-hour Category 2 hurricane right now. It's showing signs, subtle different signs, not in the wind speed, subtle different signs that is intensifying, including a steady pressure drop throughout the day today, and a solid eye is now forming. We have a lot of symmetry to the storm now, especially around the eye, with the eye walls now forming and closing off around around all quadrants at this point. So all signs point to an intensifying hurricane. You can even see that here in the last couple of frames here as we're now starting to build tall thunderstorms around the eye at this point. Even some of our outer bands are becoming a lot more lively this evening, meaning they're becoming more intense. We've had some strong lines of storms that come through places like Gulf Shores. This is where you'll get some of your gustiest winds and your highest opportunity for severe weather as well. So we are on the lookout for tornadoes in some of these outer bands. There again is a look at the track here. Tomorrow morning, anticipating 130-mile-per-hour winds here, folks. So this thing is really going to be kicking for us tomorrow, unfortunately. Major hurricane. Storm surge warning in effect here. That will include a lot of coastal Louisiana, all of coastal Mississippi, and then coastal Alabama as well. How much surge could we be looking at? In some places, it may peak as high as 15 feet, which is some pretty significant surge here, folks. 7 to 11 feet coastal Mississippi, so a place like Waveland, Bay St. Louis, Long Beach, Gulfport, Biloxi. Those are all spots where you could get 7 to 11 feet of storm surge. And then Pascagoula, 4 to 7 feet. Mobile Bay here, 2 to 4 feet. And then on the west side, and again, say that the center track is going to go like this, on the west side, you could be looking for some spots here with this surge as high as 9 feet coming our way. Hurricane warnings are in effect here, highlighted in purple. This is where we could see hurricane force winds come our way here. I was just reading the most recent message from the Hurricane Center. I'm going to quote it for you here, all right? Sunday in portions of a hurricane warning area along the Louisiana coast, including metropolitan New Orleans, with potentially catastrophic wind damage possible where the core of Ida moves onshore. Catastrophic is the word that the Hurricane Center is using, so be ready in that area that's highlighted in purple. And as we even talked to the emergency managers there, it could be weeks for some locations before power is restored. We think that we're going to have widespread power outages here. So if you take a look at the probability of hurricane force winds, I'd highlight this area here in the red color and more intense. Those are the areas where you have at least a 70% chance of hurricane force winds. Yes, that does include areas in and around New Orleans up toward Baton Rouge. 110-mile-per-hour winds in this purple area. 74 to up to 110 in the red area. Could that be as far north as Alexandria? We're looking at hurricane force winds. Even a place like Jackson or Monroe, winds could be somewhere 58 to 73. That's enough that you would get a severe thunderstorm warning. 70-mile-per-hour winds could knock down trees. It could make things that you have in your yard. We talk about this a lot, Jackie. Oh, I've got some lawn furniture out there, or I've got lawn ornaments, I've got tools in my yard, whatever. All those things can become projectiles when the winds get that high.
Yes. That's why it's so important to bring all that stuff in. So we're expecting all of that in Baton Rouge as well. Our winds could be 100 to 110 miles per hour at times. So think about that. That's the equivalent of an EF2 tornado, just a lot bigger, moving over a major metropolitan area here. We start issuing warnings on severe thunderstorms when the winds reach 60 miles per hour. I mean, a lot of big cities across the country just had to deal with that the last couple of days, including Minneapolis, Washington, D.C., where we had a lot of tree damage. So those type of things we can absolutely expect that's going to be lasting for a long period of time. So the winds are really going to start picking up here, we think, by tomorrow morning. But the peak of the storm will be likely late in the day and into tomorrow evening. And this will likely be hours and hours of tropical storm force conditions and then hurricane winds expected for a shorter period of time, maybe a handful of hours or so. So that is battery. Now, depending where that center goes, because it's a really close shave here in Baton Rouge. It could go just a little bit to our east, it could go a little bit to our west, or go right over us. We could see some really dramatic changes in our wind direction. If it stays off to our east, our winds are going to stay a little bit more in the same direction, and so that could help things out a little bit. But it's tough where, the winds will blow one way, knock stuff down, and then winds will go back the other way and knock things down from a different direction. So those are all things we have to watch out for. So how do you get through something like this? How do you get through hours of these hurricane force winds? Because there was no evacuation order here in Baton Rouge. You hide from the wind is what you do. So you get to an interior room, you get to the lowest level of your home, just like a tornado. You stay away from doors and windows. Put your helmet on. Get a mattress or a blanket to cover you up from the potential of flying debris. Now, the only exception to that would be if your life is being threatened by flash flooding. Obviously, you don't want to be on the lowest level. So preparations wrapping up here in Baton Rouge, but also have been underway today in New Orleans, and that's where we find our storm tracker, Jim Cantori. Jim?
A pretty nice night here in New Orleans, but boy, what is looming offshore is not nice at all. Things we're seeing tonight, the entire French Quarter shut down, restaurants, bars here in the city that people come to kind of relieve a little stress. The New Orleans and the Natchez both kind of sitting here on the shoreline in port where they would normally be enjoying a nice little river cruise, especially during the daytime hours. Either way you slice it, this area is going to deal with a hurricane, whether they deal with the right front quadrant or the eye wall or the outskirts of that. There will be big impacts in through here. First of all, rainfall. This is a city that sits 8 feet below sea level. Can we pump 10 to 15 inches of rain out of the city? That's the first question. 96 and 99 pumps are working. The other question is, you have many, many hospitals here around New Orleans, 30 of them. They are full of patients, many with COVID. Should we lose power? Should we need to get them out of a flood situation? That will be a daunting task, to say the least. So these are things we will be watching as this storm potentially grows overnight into a major hurricane. That's the forecast, and that's what's coming ashore in Louisiana sometime on Sunday. The anniversary of Hurricane Katrina 16 years ago to the date. How eerie is that? Reporting from the Riverwalk in New Orleans, I'm meteorologist Jim Cantori.
Certainly eerie thinking that this comes on the anniversary of Katrina for sure, but hopefully, you know, folks really have that memory fresh in their mind of how devastating that was for New Orleans, and that they do take this storm seriously and are prepared for all that it has to bring. This isn't a good situation here for New Orleans or for much of Louisiana. Julie, want to bring you back in for the timing and some of these impacts, because we're going to be feeling it before the sun comes up tomorrow.
Yeah, it won't be long, Jackie. Thanks for that. And, you know, we take a look here at New Orleans when we can start to experience some of those tropical storm force winds, and it won't be long. It'll be coming in the morning, the early morning hours. The rain also coming in. Taking a look at our future radar here. This is 7 a.m. Some of those outer bands certainly established there on shore and will continue to push in throughout the day. We're talking about a lot of rainfall coming in to some of those southern Louisiana parishes, including New Orleans. So it's going to be a rough go. This model takes it around noontime with the eye just to the south of Houma, Louisiana, and then pushing in. So still keeping it off here to the west of New Orleans. Now that could change. It could wobble a bit. It's not all set in stone yet by any means. So that could really change things in terms of wind impacts, surge impacts. The rain impacts, though, we're still going to be dealing with it in a place like New Orleans no matter what. Heavy rainfall for several hours, lasting all the way through just almost into Monday. So that rain is going to pile up. Flooding is very likely here. And tornadoes are not out of the question either. We have a 3 on our Torcon here. That does include Gulfport, Hattiesburg, New Orleans and Baton Rouge, as well as Grand Isle. So looking at least a 3 out of 10 chance of a tornado developing, which sometimes happens often with these tropical systems. The winds, as I mentioned, are going to pick up overnight tonight into tomorrow. But this is Sunday night at 7 o'clock. We're looking at hurricane force winds, Mike, coming into southern Louisiana, at least for a few hours. We're going to be dealing with those hurricane force winds, but the tropical storm force winds, as Jackie was mentioning, they're going to last into Monday in some cases. So power outages are going to be a big, big problem.
I think they're going to be a huge problem, unfortunately. It's a live look at the French Quarter tonight in New Orleans. The vantage point from this camera doesn't show a whole lot of activity down there tonight. I think that'd be a good news. Although, I would say that I just got a text message from Jim Cantori and crew and his producer Steve saying that where they are in the French Quarter, there are actually quite a few people out. And he says, many more than should be. So, thanks for the report, Steve. And I got to tell you, let's get to our safe spot tonight. Get there tonight. Maybe have your fun, but get there tonight and hunker down for the remainder of the storm. Hurricane warnings do remain in effect. That does include New Orleans, Morgan City, and up around Baton Rouge as well. Tropical storm warnings go as far north as I-20. Here's the thing. This is one of the major concerns that we've got is how much wind will be coming with this, because we think we'll have an intensifying storm at landfall. There'll be a core where winds could gust 110 miles per hour or maybe even greater. And yes, New Orleans, that could be us. There could be areas as far west as Lake Charles, north as Alexandria, Alexandria, and maybe over toward even say like a Bay St. Louis, or winds could be somewhere between Category 1 and strong Category 2 winds here. And then winds that go up to Jackson, Mississippi that could also knock out power. Winds that could gust 70 plus. Then you can also see widespread damage anticipated in a lot of different places. Stay with us. Full coverage through landfall and beyond. Our teams are in the field reporting on the storm for you. Stay safe. We're back after this.
Visible.
You can't stop a force of nature. This hurricane season, rely on one of your own. It's a fact. No other news network out there is trusted more than the Weather Channel.
This is epic!
Trusted to give you every advantage before the storm. Trusted to be there where and when you need us. Trusted to work around the clock until every threat is over.
We're in this for the long haul.
Because America doesn't trust hurricane season to just anyone.
We're not the same state that we were 16 years ago. We have a hurricane risk reduction system in place because of the generosity of the people of the United States of America that we didn't have before. And outside of that hurricane risk reduction system, we also have tremendous investments in protection across South Louisiana with levees and gates and pumps.
That's Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards talking about the new levee system, which has been reinforced since Hurricane Katrina and designed to save the city, basically, from a Category 3 storm or more, which Ida is expected to be. Welcome back to our continuing live coverage. We are just hours away now from impacts and landfall as Ida closes in from the coast, about less than 300 miles away from the coastline right now. I'm live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and want to talk a little bit more about what's happening with the storm right now. It is a Category 2 hurricane, maximum winds at 105 miles per hour. That's the same as where it was earlier today, but I don't want you going to bed tonight after seeing this report and saying, oh, it's just a 2. I don't need to worry as much about a 4 by tomorrow morning. That's not true. This is on track, just as we anticipated, to continue to rapidly intensify and become a major hurricane before the morning. So the hurricane hunters are flying into that right now. Of course, they had to evacuate Keesler Air Force Base because it just wasn't safe for them to stay there. They are coming out now of Texas instead. So we're going to continue to get new data here with these latest flights, Mike, and we'll see if we get any winds bigger than 105, but the pressure has dropped. And sometimes there's a little bit of lag between that pressure drop and when those winds increase. And so it still looks like we're getting big convection, big blowups around the center of that storm. It looks like the eye wall where the strongest winds tend to be in a hurricane like this. Looks like that's continuing to build right now.
It is. It definitely is. I want to ask you, Jackie, too, you know, the governor, I really appreciate, you know, the honesty of the governor. He's always been, you know, very forthright when he's been on our air. But, you know, he did say it's different now. This is going to be different than Katrina for a place like New Orleans in particular, with the flood risk reduction system, the improved levee system. Having said that, it's not foolproof either, and it hasn't really been tested since they built it.
That is an excellent point. So hopefully, you know, as we test it here in the next 12 to 24 hours or so, hopefully it will withstand that. And it sounds like he's confident that it will. But, you know, there are areas that have been evacuated. They're outside of that levee system that are going to have very likely catastrophic impacts. And in addition to all that, we've got to worry about the rainfall, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we've got the levee system that protects us, but we're in a bowl here in New Orleans, and those pumps can only handle an inch of rain in the first hour and then a half of an inch for 5 more hours after that. And these rainfall rates could be well beyond that.
Yeah, I think that could be one of the bigger concerns. I think the two biggest concerns, if the levee system holds, then I think it is going to be wind damage and rainfall flooding. I think it still could be a very, very big hit, unfortunately, for New Orleans. But many other areas, just like where you are in Baton Rouge, is why I think extensive power outages that last for weeks are going to be in the making. But let's talk a little bit more about the rainfall. We'll get back to Jackie here in just a second. There's a heavy rainfall forecast with this. Louisiana and Mississippi, but extends all the way up into the Northeast, believe it or not, through late in the week. I know it's only Saturday night, but we're even thinking about what could happen come Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. There's a look at the high-resolution modeling. Isn't that just something to see? I mean, we didn't have this available to us back when Katrina hit. If we did, maybe it would have been different. I don't know. But that's amazing to see what the models are pumping out with this just high-res stuff. Then you can see with the center of circulation somewhere near Tupelo come Tuesday morning, heavy rain for us through Middle Tennessee, who's been hard hit the last week. We saw the tragedy that unfolded in Waverly last week. That's not a good forecast. 5 to 6 inches of rain, up 55. Into Jackson, Yazoo City, Vicksburg, 4 inches of rain could come our way. Tuesday then, a center of circulation sitting over Middle Tennessee, Nashville, we're going to get hammered with heavy rain. Watch the forecast then going late in the week. My goodness, that's the European model forecasting in some spots 3 to 5 inches of rain coming our way. Lexington, Wheeling, Harrisburg, all the way toward Hartford and Boston. And look at the GFS model, somewhat similar, but heavy rain also right into the Northeast, including the Hudson Valley. So, Jackie, we've got concerns down the road. We'll get to that, but the immediate concern is right along the coastline.
Absolutely. And rain and flooding are going to be one of the big threats. You know, all of the big hazards are going to be coming with Ida. Here in Baton Rouge, we're worried about flooding rains and we're worried about winds. Those are going to be the two primary. Surge is not going to be a problem here. When it comes to the rainfall, we're going to get some pretty intense rates, and some of the bands will likely be arriving already by tomorrow morning. We will deal with hours of steady rainfall that could total up to somewhere between 8 to as much as 16 inches of rain, and we couldn't rule out isolated areas even higher than that, perhaps 20 inches. So that's what we could be facing here. Mississippi River is back behind me. We're high enough here on the East Bank that that should not be a problem, but there are some other area of rivers that are expected to flood. More continuing coverage after this.
I know that tomorrow, for many people, is a very difficult anniversary. It is the 16th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. I'm also aware that it's very painful to think about another powerful storm like Hurricane Ida making landfall on that anniversary. But I also want you to know that we're not in the same state that we were 16 years ago. This system...
It is hard to think about on the anniversary of Katrina. Yesterday was the anniversary of Laura making landfall. Louisiana has been hit year after year after year with devastating storms, and Ida, unfortunately, is going to be devastating as it arrives tomorrow. Preparations have been underway for days now. It's been a long one for people here in Baton Rouge. I'm meteorologist Jackie Jarris. I'm live in Baton Rouge on the east bank of the Mississippi River. Behind me, you can see the river bridge. This is Interstate 10, where we're approaching the midnight hour, and we still have traffic consistently going across the bridge as folks continue to work their way out of southeastern Louisiana, and a lot of them have been evacuating westward in here. Sandbags have been filled today. In fact, the sand was running low, and they had to bring more in. Gas stations have been filled with long lines of people waiting to get their gas, and grocery stores very very busy as well. So now, as we're approaching midnight, by the time we wake up, we're going to start to feel some of these impacts, certainly at the coast, and we could even get some of those bands here tomorrow morning. So now is a time where folks should be going to bed. They should be getting some good rest, because tomorrow night they are likely not getting that rest. And you need to be alert. You need to be sharp and be able to make some good decisions to help protect yourself and your family. So, Mike, you know, this is, of course, an anniversary weekend, but it's also climatologically. That's why, because this is the time of the year where the water temperatures are warm, the winds are light, and it is easy for hurricanes to form in that main development region. And that's where the majority of all of our major hurricanes develop.
And, you know, getting into the Gulf of Mexico, too, it usually means it's going to hit something, too. That's why there's such a risk when it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, and we fear these ones, right? And, you know, and I think the anniversary just has a lot of people's interest, right? And so thought maybe we'd do a little bit of compare and contrast to Katrina, right? Because that's the one that everyone is thinking about at this point, with the 16-year anniversary on its way. So what we did here is we put the forecast cone of Ida, and that red swirl, that's Ida, and then the historical track of Katrina, all right? There are similarities and differences. And I went back because I was curious myself how similar they were at this point in time, the 10 o'clock Central Time advisory the night before landfall. Where was Katrina? Well, Katrina sat about right here, 105 miles from the mouth of the Mississippi. Ida is 145 miles from the mouth of the Mississippi. And consider this as well. The pressure at that time was 904 millibars, really low. Ida's right now is 964, so it's a weaker hurricane, all right? What else about these two? Well, consider where it was, all right? Now, also consider this. The winds at the time, same time, 10 o'clock advisory, 160 miles per hour, Cat 5. With Katrina. Our current Hurricane Ida, 105 mile per wind, so significantly weaker, okay? That was Cat 5. This is a Category 2. All right, also consider this, and I'm going to put a little measurement on here. This is going to give you an interesting idea. The hurricane force winds with Katrina at this same time, 10 o'clock advisory, night before landfall, extended out 105 miles from the center. So it went out about yay far, and I'm going to take that in both directions. This is how far out the hurricane force winds extended. It was a big hurricane, okay, and it was a Cat 5. This thing was huge. The hurricane force winds that extend out from Ida go out roughly 40 miles in each direction. So this, can you compare those two? This is how big Ida is. It's significantly smaller. It's significantly weaker. Okay, so those are all benefits, all right? The comparison is that they are going to come potentially into very close proximity to each other, all right? So they may make landfall, maybe at the same spot, but probably within about 50 miles or so. And the other thing that's different is the angle of approach, and that makes a huge difference, okay? It's a smaller storm, it's a weaker storm, but the angle of approach is more like this, okay? That could bring more winds south side of Pontchartrain, pushing it north, whereas as Katrina came down along the track there, we actually had winds that were pushing water south in toward New Orleans here. And because it came in perpendicular like this, we maximized the storm surge up into Mississippi. The forecast for storm surge was 28 feet, max 28 feet during Katrina. It's roughly half of that now for Ida. Powerful storm, but not Katrina.
People today.
No other news network out there is trusted more than the Weather Channel. And America doesn't trust hurricane season to just anyone.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage of Hurricane Ida. I'm meteorologist Jackie Jarris, live in Baton Rouge. Want to show you the scene right now out of New Orleans. This is the French Quarter, and it is a ghost town. This is a stark difference compared to what it looked like last night when it was hopping with people and revelers and party goers. Today, it's all business, and hopefully people are where they're going to be to ride out the storm. Hopefully most of them were able to get out. Now here in Baton Rouge, I'm down on the Riverwalk area, and there's still some people out here tonight. You know, folks are trying to have a good time their last evening. The weather has actually been very good. There were some showers and thunderstorms up to our north earlier, but pretty much missed the downtown area, which was actually really good news because we were able to get those preparations done today without being disruptive by those showers and thunderstorms. So an emergency declaration in effect here. The mayor expects that there will be a curfew put into place for tomorrow. Of course, a hurricane warning in effect, and wind threat is probably our biggest concern here. We're expecting wind gusts well over 100 miles per hour and widespread power outages. Now, the city of New Orleans did not issue a mandatory evacuation order ahead of Ida. The mayor says that there just simply wasn't enough time to implement contraflow.
The citywide evacuation plan cannot be implemented again because we're not calling for a mandatory evacuation because the time simply is not on our side. We do not want to have people on the road and therefore in greater danger because of the lack of time.
Now, with no mandatory evacuation in place, people who didn't already leave are now having to hunker down, boarding up their windows and planning to ride out the storm. Now, since New Orleans is below sea level and surrounded by water, the city's levee and pump system will be put to the test. City officials say the pumps are working and they are preparing, though, for the worst.
We're certainly going through a lot of preparation. We are running all the pumps, making sure that they are functional. We are making sure that our self-generating turbines are online and are working well. As you know, every single drop that falls on our city has to be pumped out. So obviously, with the intense rain that we're expecting, we are very concerned and we're preparing for the worst.
And of course, those levees that are around New Orleans, very critical to keeping the Crescent City safe. I want to take a closer look at how those levees actually work. Like the roads and bridges you use every day, levees are just another piece of the infrastructure often taken for granted. Until there's a problem. Levees are surprisingly common in the U.S. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers says 1 out of 5 counties have levees. About 100,000 miles of levees wind their way across the nation. But the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is responsible for just 14,400 miles, or about 15%. The remaining 85,000 or so miles fall under many different local, state, and federal jurisdictions. At their simplest, a levee is just a pile of dirt or wall of concrete meant to hold back the water.
There are 4 primary reasons why levees fail. They include seepage, stability, erosion, and height.
Water can seep through the levee, weakening the structure from within. When a section of levee slides away, that's called a stability failure. So-called toe erosion can steepen the levee slope until the now unstable structure collapses. Finally, the levee just isn't high enough. Water flows over the top, causing the levee to fail from the top down. But most well-maintained levees don't fail. And today, hundreds of communities depend on levees for their livelihoods and even their lives. It's really interesting and just pretty incredible when you think about it, how all of that works and all the time and effort and money and energy put into all that to help protect the people. Of course, a much better situation than what the levee system was so many years ago. So, Julie, hopefully, as we test this, everything works the way that it's supposed to work. But New Orleans has some big impacts despite that. And I might want to mention, even though no more mandatory evacuation for, inside the levees, if you're outside the levee system, a mandatory evacuation was issued.
That's correct. And, it's going to be tested in a big way with this particular storm, I'm afraid. We're talking about a tremendous amount of rain coming in, and all of that water, as we just heard, has to get pumped out. So it's really going to put a strain, I think, on that system. But hoping for the best, we want to take you through our future radar here and show you what we can expect. Those outer bands arriving in the early morning hours, waking up tomorrow, likely to very blustery conditions, rain coming in and continuing then to only worsen as we head into the afternoon and the early evening hours. This is a look at 3 o'clock. This particular model taking the eye of Ida just to the south of Houma, Louisiana, and then moving on shore there certainly on the northern right front quadrant, as we call it, a ton of rainfall. So if this verifies true, then we are looking at just the bulk of that rain perhaps coming in right into New Orleans, which is not good news. Could wobble a little bit. Either way, a lot of rain is going to pile up. The winds are going to be an issue. Power outages will occur with this. Tornadoes could occur as well. We're looking at a 3 on the Torcon here in portions of South Louisiana. So these spin-ups associated with tropical systems can also do damage, and we're concerned about that. But I think the wind and the water are going to be the main ones that we're going to have to follow closely. Hopefully everyone has made a plan and staying safe. Time is actually running out. Stay with the Weather Channel for continuing coverage.
When your family...
We've deployed 500 FEMA emergency response personnel in Texas and Louisiana.
We're prepared with swiftwater rescue teams with helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft, as well as high water vehicles, food and water, as well as generators, ready to deploy and support the state of Louisiana or Mississippi as needed after the threat and the storm has passed.
The reality is that if it's anything more, in the tone of 5 or 6 inches an hour, the system will be overwhelmed and we will experience some flooding throughout the city.
And a live look now at New Orleans here in the French Quarter, where it has just started raining. You see the streets are wet and they are empty. The winds are also picking up as this city prepares for Ida. It is a very eerie scene there in the French Quarter, which would at this hour normally be packed with people out and about having a great time. So fortunately, a lot of these businesses, it looks like, have shut down and people have gotten out of town, which is what we hope for. We take you now live also to Moss Point, Mississippi. This is I-10, and you'll notice the headlights there, just a sea of vehicles trying to get out of harm's way. I-10 being a major thoroughfare there in both directions, east or west, coming up from southeastern Louisiana, a way for people to get out, which was highly encouraged for many people, and in fact mandatory for those outside of the levee protection zone in and around New Orleans anyway. So New Orleans, the city of New Orleans, not under mandatory evacuation, but elsewhere they were. So again, we want to get you caught up on some of the very latest information we are getting in. FEMA has deployed more than 120 ground and air ambulances to help evacuate nursing homes in the hurricane's path. Meanwhile, the Baton Rouge Airport has canceled all flights after 10 a.m. Sunday. And in Jefferson Parish, all fire stations have generators on hand for residents to recharge oxygen concentrator batteries after Ida has passed. Power outages are going to be a big problem, Mike, and if they haven't charged up the cell phone and electronics tonight, now's a good time to plug everything in.
There's no kidding. I mean, extra batteries for your phone, because like our phone is our lifeline these days, right? We've got to have it, and you could go without power for quite some time. Now, a lot of times, in my experience, is the cell phone towers seem to do pretty well. That's not a guarantee, but sometimes then they'll also, after the storm, bring in temporary towers to help with the communication. Still waiting on the 1 o'clock Central Time advisory. It's not come in yet, so and it's going to be be another hour or so before that happens. But the latest value, 105 mile per hour winds, Category 2, 964 mile per hour winds, northwest movement at 16 miles per hour. You can see it's got a well-formed eye at this point, and the concentration of thunderstorms around the center is much more defined now than it was, but still forecasting a major hurricane tomorrow morning when we wake up. And I think with the pressure dropping right now, and it's done that consistently this evening, but the wind speed not going up, which usually is what happens, is the pressure drop, the wind speed goes up. That hasn't necessarily happened yet, so I think you're going to see the wind speed really pick up overnight tonight, and we're anticipating a major hurricane in the morning. As far as surge goes, there could be some spots here where locally you get 15 feet of storm surge, which is going to put some neighborhoods underwater. Even over into coastal Mississippi, surge could be as high as 11 feet, which is some pretty serious stuff. So let's walk you through some specific locations. I want to focus specifically on Houma, Louisiana. All right, I want to give you a shout out here in Houma and kind of go through some details of what may be coming your way. Now, we'll say this. The surge forecast has come down just a little bit in Houma, so I want to give you some hopes. But having said that, there is going to be some water inundation. Where specifically? All right, so there could be some industrial areas around Industrial Boulevard, south of there, where you're going to have some problems. You're going to have some problems in industrial areas between, say, Acadian Drive and probably the Bayou here. And then we're going to have some issues, I think, also in places like Tunnel Boulevard, right in here, north of Tunnel Boulevard in particular, where we've got a little hidden bayou in there. So if you're familiar with a place like Synergy Bank or Smoothie King or the Mazda or Ford dealerships, I think those are places that could potentially take on some water. So the Mazda dealership and the Ford dealership are right here, okay? I think there, most likely you could be looking at somewhere between maybe 1 and 3 feet of water with the current forecast track, okay? The good news is, just north of there, right there is Terrebonne High School. I think we're going to stay dry there. I really do. The other concern may be areas down at St. Charles, right in here. If you're familiar with where Ralph's Supermarket is, or the Walgreens, or the CVS, could be a little bit of water intrusion there. I would anticipate somewhere between 1 and 3 feet of water there. Also, some densely populated neighborhoods in here as well. I'm going to go ahead and circle those for you in red so that it really sticks out. There are some areas right in here. We got a lot of neighborhoods, a lot of houses. I think 1 to 3 feet of water is possible there as well. The issues are Intercoastal comes here, Bayou Terrebonne here, Bayou here, Bayou here, all kinds of water around Houma, and the danger is certainly there for water. Folks, once you stay with us tonight here on the Weather Channel throughout the night, updates on the forecast track of Ida, live coverage from our meteorologist positioned along the Gulf Coast. That resumes before dawn right here on the Weather Channel. We anticipate a major hurricane in the morning. Be smart, be safe, be ready. Have a good night. We'll see you in the morning.
our strength, our power, our purpose.